You know, when things get messy and a bunch of stuff happens one after another, how do you figure out who's really to blame for the final outcome? It can be super tricky, but the law has this really cool tool for it, a way to cut through the noise and find the real cause when a simple timeline just doesn't work. Okay, let's dive right in.
Let's make it simple. Imagine a line of dominoes. If person A pushes the first one, and that knocks over B, which then knocks over C, who's on the hook for C's fall? Is A responsible for the entire chain reaction, or does someone else's action, or maybe even something totally random, like a gust of wind, break that chain of blame? This is the exact puzzle the law has to solve all the time.
And the solution has this, well, kind of scary-sounding Latin name, Novus Actus Interveniens. But don't worry, all it really means is a new intervening act. Think of it like a legal circuit breaker. It's the doctrine that steps in and says, whoa, hold on, something new and big just happened, and it's taken over as the real cause of the problem. It basically stops the flow of blame right in its tracks. So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll talk about this whole idea of a chain of blame. Then, we'll get into the 3 specific rules the courts use to decide if that chain gets broken. After that, we'll look at a couple of wild, real-life cases, one with a firework getting tossed around and another with a crazy gust of wind. And we'll wrap it all up by comparing when a chain holds strong versus when it shatters. All right, let's start with Section 1, a chain of blame. We're talking about how the law follows the breadcrumbs to figure out who's responsible when a whole series of events unfolds. So in tort law, which is all about wrongful acts causing harm, there's this idea of the chain of causation. It's the invisible line that connects what someone did wrong to the final injury. Simple enough, right? But what happens if something else happens in the middle? A third person steps in, or a storm rolls through. That's when things get complicated, and that's where this whole concept really shines. Okay, on to the heart of it, the 3 chain-breaking rules. This is the actual test the courts use to see if we have a true Novus Actus Interveniens. So here they are, the big 3. For an event to be a real chain breaker, it has to be 1. Independent, 2. Unforeseeable, and 3. Powerful enough to become the main cause. These 3 things work together. Let's dig into what each one really means. First up, independence. This is pretty straightforward. The new event can't just be the next logical domino in the line. It can't be a simple continuation of the mess the first person started. It has to be something genuinely new, something separate that pops up on its own. Next, Rule 2, unforeseeability. And honestly, this is the big one. This is the one that comes up again and again. The law basically asks, if you were a normal, reasonable person in the shoes of the person who started all this, could you have seen something like this happening? If the answer is, yeah, probably, then the chain doesn't break. The blame keeps flowing. And Rule 3, sufficient power. The new act has to be so big, so significant that it completely overshadows the original mistake. It has to be powerful enough that it makes the first screw-up look like ancient history, just a piece of the background scenery, not the main event. This brings us to a couple more Latin phrases. Sorry, but they're useful. The new chain-breaking act becomes the Causa Causans. That's the real immediate driving cause. The original mistake gets downgraded to what's called a causa sine qua non. That's a fancy way of saying, yeah, it had to happen for the final result to occur, but it wasn't the main reason. Okay, enough with the theory. Let's see how this stuff plays out in the real world with a crazy case. We're jumping in a time machine back to 1773, to a busy marketplace and a very, very bad idea involving a firework or a squib, as they called it. So get this, a guy named Shepard lights a squib, basically a small firecracker, and just chucks it into the crowded market. It lands right on the stall of a man named Willis. Willis, obviously panicking, grabs it and throws it away immediately to protect his stuff. It then lands on another guy's stall, Ryle, who does the exact same thing, pure self-preservation. But this time, it explodes right in the face of our poor plaintiff, Scott, and causes a serious eye injury. What a mess. So here's the million-dollar question for the court. Shepard started the whole thing, no doubt, but 2 other people threw that squib after him. Were their panicked throws a new intervening act? Did they break the chain of causation and let Shepard off the hook for what happened to Scott? Well, the court gave a hard no. Let's run it through our 3 rules. First, were the throws by Willis and Ryle independent? Nope. They were a direct, panicked reaction to the danger Shepard created. Second, were they unforeseeable? Not a chance. If you throw explosives into a crowd, you should absolutely expect people to freak out and try to get it away from them. And third,
Were their actions powerful enough to become the new cause? Nah. The court found that Shepard's initial act was the real, effective cause from start to finish.
And this case gave us a really important rule of thumb. When an intervening act is just a foreseeable, natural human response to a dangerous situation, like trying to save yourself, it does not count as a Novus Actus Interveniens. It's just part of the predictable chaos the defendant unleashed. Okay, so that was about human reaction. But what about a force of nature? Let's jump forward to 1891 for our second case study, Lint versus Nordine. The story here is pretty simple. Someone is careless with a fire on their property. Later on, a strong wind kicks up, whips the flames across the property line, and damages their neighbor's place. So, could the wind, this powerful natural force, be considered a new intervening act? Could an act of God, as they sometimes say, be the thing that breaks the chain and absolves the person who was careless with the fire in the first place? And once again, the court said no. The defendant was still on the hook. Why? Because wind isn't some bizarre freak event. It's a common, natural, and generally foreseeable force. The court basically said that if you're going to be negligent with fire, the risk of wind spreading it is just part of the package. It's an anticipated risk you have to account for. All right, let's pull all this together. It's time for a final showdown. Broken versus unbroken. When does the chain of blame hold, and when does it just shatter? So the chain stays totally intact if the new act was foreseeable, like the wind. It also stays intact if it was just a natural human response, like in our flying squib case. Basically, if the original act remained the main driver. On the other hand, the chain is broken when the new act is something truly extraordinary and unforeseeable, or a deliberate, independent choice made by someone else. And ultimately, it breaks when that new act is so powerful that the original mistake becomes just background noise. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? The courts aren't just looking at a simple timeline of A, then B, then C. They're digging deeper. They're on a hunt for the real, the operative reason for the damage. And the two biggest clues they look for are foreseeability and continuity. This leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. In our world today, which is so full of complex chain reactions, where one tweet, one market fluctuation, one mistake can ripple out in 1,000 directions, where should we draw the line? Where does responsibility truly end?